Welcome back, everybody, to this week's episode of the JSS Podcast. I am Byron Enriquez, your host. And today's episode is going to be a little bit different. We're going to get into some conversation that I know a lot of people shy away from, but I think it's important. So, not going to get into the politics of it, but we're going to be talking about some issues that I think affect everybody. You know, whether you're Republican, Democrat, you're independent, you're somewhere in between. Today's about listening, not to respond, not to argue, just listen and start some dialogue. Because we're not getting into politics. It's about people, it's about business, it's about housing, it's about families. And it's about something that affects our communities it every day and affects each and every one of us, whether we like to look at it or not. So you've been following the news. There's been a lot of stuff with immigration enforcement and things that I think are very personal to me. But it's been something that's really weighing heavy on a lot of people, and it's really talking about public safety and policy and enforcement. And again, today I'm not here to put my feelings on you or tell you what to think. It's just to have a conversation about how this affects families, how this affects entrepreneurship, how this affects home ownership, how it affects our local economy, right? And this podcast has always been an opportunity for me to share and to talk and educate a little bit and really get into the weeds with some of the stuff about how building generational wealth and home ownership and lending and investing. To me, it's a topic that I think really goes hand in hand with those issues. So again, like I said, it's an uncomfortable topic for a lot of people, but just wanted to really talk about it a little bit. If we look back, America has always been a land of immigrants, right? It's the immigrant story is what's created the American dream. Right. So it's always come in waves, and it's always been part of our growth. It's early settlers were entrepreneurs, were scientists, teachers, healthcare workers. It's always been come in waves. And as the country has needed immigrants, it's always called upon to do stuff. Right. We help build America. We help build our infrastructure. We help build railroads. We worked in factories, steel mills, mines, in the ports, construction. We've built businesses. It's always been a big force in our growth, in our economy, and who we are. I don't want to get this wrong. It says foreign-born workers make up about 19% of the U.S. civilian workforce. It's been something that we have set our foundations on, and we've worked in the fields, we've worked construction jobs, we've worked in the ports, factories, we've built infrastructure, we've built bridges, we've helped build our country, right? And it's something that has always been there, right? In different waves throughout different generations from the beginning of time. One of the things that I, as a business owner, really admire about the immigrant community is the entrepreneurial spirit that I say we have, right? They've come over to this country with very little, with dreams. They've come over with no network, no family wealth, a lot of times not knowing the language. And if you look at it, a lot of immigrants have gone out and started businesses. Across the United States, immigrants started a business at higher rates than native-born Americans. They've created jobs. They're creating opportunities. They've really put their stamp on our economy. And if nothing else, that is the American dream. That is what our founding fathers have put out, right? So I think, to me, that's always something that's always part of what we do and why we're here. And then kind of to bring it around into the housing connection. I work in lending every day, right? So I always, wanted to focus on the way how this affects housing. Housing isn't just where people live. That it's a big factor of it, but it's one of the primary ways that people build wealth here in America. You buy your first home, you build equity, you refinance. It gives you opportunity to move up in the real estate game. Use those proceeds to invest in real estate, flip properties. Start a construction business. Those are things that housing provides, right? And it's always been something, of how where immigrants have really involved and really part of this ecosystem. We're homeowners, renters, builders, contractors, laborers, investors, architects, engineers. All aspects of this housing ecosystem has been affected by immigrants in one way or another. Right. So it's one of the things that we can't ignore. Construction relies heavily on immigrant labor. As a dean in this business, we're seeing lots of job sites, just that are becoming empty. And again, not trying to tell you how to think about that. I'm just saying it's just the reality of what's happening in this country, right? We're really facing a lot of housing shortages. And as a lender, somebody who's finances construction projects, that's one of the things that we're seeing, that these projects are stalling out, right? When we need it the most. And yeah, look, it's a balanced perspective, and I admit it. It's something that we got to look at, right? It's sometimes we bring in extra immigrants and people into certain communities where yes, they may be adding positive impact, and yes, it's supply and demand if they're taking up housing and causing prices to go up. So I get it 100%, right? It is something that there's two sides to every coin. So it's not that's not the point of today's conversation, right? It's how this these policies and these new things that are happening right now, how it affects our economy, how it affects our market, how it affects our communities, in all aspects of it. I think whether your family's been here for 400 years or your family's been here for 4 years or 40 or 50, whatever it is, I think everybody comes to this country with the aspiration and the dreams and the goals to build something for your next generations, to leave a legacy, to see what we can do to help the next generation, right? To build something of value, right? And I think that is the American dream, right? The American dream is about creating opportunities. It's about, where this country helps define your aspirations, and it gives you the tools and resources to be able to accomplish those. Right. And I think that's something that's lost in this conversation, where whatever side you're on. And, again, today's not about anger. It's not about that frustration that, I'm not trying to create people butting heads. It's about a dialogue. So let me tell you guys a little bit. I know a lot of people who know me and I've talked about this before, but my story, right? It's before I became a lender, before I started JSS. I was just another kid coming from an immigrant family, first generation. My parents came over to this country about 50 years ago, and I say this story a lot. I've become the translator. I've reviewed documentation for them. I helped them fill out paperwork, helped them at doctor's appointments, legal appointments, legal documents, banking, all of it. And those experiences shaped who I am as a person. It's shaped, what my goals are and what my, why I do what I do, right? To try to help people. But all of that really has taught me that financial stability isn't always just about money. It's about creating security for your family. It's about creating a home, creating a business, creating a future. My parents didn't come here looking for shortcuts. I've never seen them take a day off or take the easy way out. I've seen my parents work, 2 jobs at a time, working nights, working days, working graveyard shifts, really busting their butts to provide and to give a better future. I've watched them work long hours. I've watched them save every single paycheck. I've watched them be proud of what they've been able to accomplish and what they've done for this country, and leaving their mark. I've watched them believe in this country. I've watched them believe that this is a land of opportunities and what it can for them. Uh, and it taught me that wealth isn't built overnight. It taught it's showed me, again, like I said, it's shaped who I am and who I've become. I've have that grind mentality to go out and work because we have to, and because we're trying to leave something better for the next generation. It's taught me about sacrifice. It's taught me about discipline. It's taught me about education and using those opportunities. Uh, and that's one of the things that I always, every week when we have these conversations, it's about try to empower people and try to show and try to teach people that there's opportunities out there for stuff that we can do. That's why today's conversation really matters to me. So regardless of your political beliefs, and I think we all can agree on one thing, that families deserve opportunities, that families deserve to build a better future for your next generations, that we want to make this country better, that we want to further our people, that we want good for people. We want good for our communities. And I think if we start from that place, it really puts us in a different perspective and a different mentality, because the uncertainty of things really has consequences on business, really has consequences on our market, really has consequences on our economy. When you run a business, and you're seeing, restaurants struggling with staff, you're seeing construction projects slowing down, you're seeing, agriculture and our food products, getting more expensive, hospitality, small owned businesses, you've seen these small entrepreneurs, smaller businesses really struggling. It really affects our economy and affects our communities. And I know there's a bigger thing, but we all feel it on a day-to-day basis. And these are, I think, topics that I think need to be addressed and need to be looked at. The impact that it has on housing, like we talked about, but we're seeing, properties that were under construction are being, the job sites are empty. We're seeing, housing where people were looking to purchase homes, where now you're seeing some stagnation in the marketplace. You're seeing, these areas where heavily were immigrant based and they were fixing up communities because the pride of ownership is starting to slow down, and we're seeing that, hey, look, I'm not going to invest in my community because I don't know how long I'm going to be here. I don't know if I'm going to be here, or another thing is, I'm not sure. People are saying I don't know if I'm wanted here anymore. It's they're wanted when something is needed from them. But as they try to better themselves and their community and their family, they're being shown that that's not the case. That we don't want them. We want your labor, but that's really it. And when you see that, it affects the community, affects the economy, affects transactions decrease. Less investment into our communities happen, which we all benefit from, right? Let's call it what it is, right? As communities improve, housing improves, the market goes up, and what's that doing is this raising valuations, of raising equity for everybody. So it's a good thing too, right? When we're seeing that push in our communities, how we're improving and how we're bettering, the places that we come into. And if you listen to our podcast before, one of the things that I always talk about is generational wealth. All right, we talk about wealth in America. We talk about the bigger, opportunities and options and to do that. But to talk about that, we also have to talk about the history and how, again, talking mainly real estate, right? And one of the things that we focus here on the podcast is to talk about, using real estate as to build generational wealth, right? And again, we can't talk about that without addressing, the history and how this has been shaped. This country, there's been policies and there's been decisions that have been made that affect housing. One of the things that I've done a lot of research on and talked about a lot in private circles. We talk about the policies of redlining. We talk about how policies were dictated about where you had access to live, where you had access to get a mortgage, and not going to get all into those policies, but redlining was something where it dictated, if you were a person of color, a Hispanic last name, you were not given opportunities for mortgages in certain areas. Banks, lenders would only lend to you in certain markets. So communities of color were forced to live in certain neighborhoods, right? We were pushed to those areas, and people always make the argument, well, that's gone. It's not really completely gone. Yes, those policies have been taken away, and the Fair Housing Act and different things have come into place to replace that. But when you're talking about generational wealth, we're talking about communities that our families, our parents, our grandparents weren't allowed to own in certain markets. So those equity, the valuation of those properties didn't increase as the very nice suburban neighborhoods, where other families had those opportunities too, right? So there's that level of wealth that's already been built up over time, just by nature of time, letting the properties increase in value, where, when we were pushed out to certain communities where that didn't happen or hasn't happened because there are opportunities for infrastructure, schooling, education hasn't been there, right? And that's it. So we can't ignore, those things, right? And I think it's something that plays into the conversation. And I know that's kind of a different topic to immigration per se, but I just kind of want to kind of share, connect the two of how policy has an impact on so many different factors. It has an impact on generations to come. Things that happen today are going to affect us 30, 50, 100 years from now. And those are the things that continue to happen, right? And that's why I think it's important for us to be educated and to be able to stand up for our community, stand up for our people, stand up for our rights as humans, as individuals. I think we have, as entrepreneurs, as leaders of our communities, we have the responsibility to help expand access, to be able to give people opportunities as everybody else. One of the things that when I started, one of the visions that I had, when JSS started expanding and growing, and we started JSS Capital, one of my visions for JSS Capital is to give opportunities for people that haven't necessarily been given those opportunities to invest in these types of wealth building programs. That I talk about, the country club crowd was the only people that know about these debt funds and these high yield investment opportunities that a lot of people don't talk about. So with JSS Capital, we're our main drive and focus is to be able to give investment opportunities for people that aren't necessarily, these super wealthy millionaires, but to give, working class people who have saved up money and think that all they have the opportunity to invest in is a 401k or maybe, a couple of things in the stock market or just, know that there's other options to invest, and that's been the one of the driving forces behind us building JSS Capital in our ecosystem, to give people those opportunities, to teach people how to invest in real estate, teach people how to flip properties, teach people how to invest in debt funds, to give, to expand on those opportunities that I think a lot of times, we haven't been given those opportunities on. As an immigrant child, my parents didn't know about those things. They were told, hey, you work your butt off, and you stay quiet, and you go and buy a home, and you do this, and again, I grew up in certain neighborhoods that they didn't have a lot. We didn't have a lot, right? We didn't have a lot of opportunities. Grew up in schools where textbooks weren't even there. The supplies weren't there for schools, right? Where no matter how hard you tried, you're always starting, a lot, behind. One of the things that I talk about, that I share, it's a kind of an analogy that I've used, is, the game of Monopoly, where you have to go around the board before you can start buying properties. And a lot of times it's families of immigrants or people of color. It's, hey, everybody else started that game a couple of rounds before us, and they got a chance to buy up all those properties. So by the time I got started in that Monopoly game, and yes, I landed on Park Place, I landed on Boardwalk, and I have the resources to be able to buy that. It's already owned by somebody because they started that game a couple of rounds before, and that's the we're playing catch up, right? That's why it's always been very hard and for a lot of people, and that's why I think for me it's been a passion of mine to be able to explain and to teach and to give people these opportunities that that we have to stand up for, that we have to go out there and get because we're not taught these things, right? We're not. It's not a generational thing, and so we're looking and we want to be that generation to build that. So again, those are the things that I want to talk about it. And I'm not getting into the topic. And I know, many Americans believe, that we need to enforce our laws, right? Not what I'm saying, right? We're definitely need to enforce laws, and we need secure borders, and we need to protect our safety and all of that. So again, it's not the purpose of this conversation. It's the purpose of me is talking today is more about humanities, talking about families, we're talking about our communities, we're talking about your neighbor. And to me, that's the bigger picture. Um, you know, uh, all of this needs to be part of the conversation. And I think it's something we lack, something that we don't want to talk about. We let our views and our opinions guide everything without having an open conversation about, our preconceived biases, letting those, tell us what we can do. Um, so what can we do? And this is again, it makes me sad. I have all these emotions that run through me, right? Anger, frustrations. But, to me, it's about what can we do? What can I control? What are the things that I do? And again, this is me doing something, right? This is me talking. This is me trying to educate people financially, teach people how to plan an estate, how to set up businesses, how to set up corporations, how to invest in real estate, how to tell people know their rights, teaching people how to, have proper documentation on their projects and, get permits and do the things that need to be done to be able to take those steps, seek qualified legal advice, talk to the right people. One of the things that I've learned over the years in my career is that, every loan tells a story. Every family has a story. Every business has a story. And we may disagree on policies. We may disagree on politics. Um, but if we stop being human beings and neighbors and friends, then what are we doing, right? Then there's no point in any of this. We've all have something of value that we can bring to our communities. There's something of value we can bring to our neighbor. But if we're not there for each other, then again, none of this matters. Um, you know, I've always felt that what you have in your bank account or what your paperwork says doesn't say anything about the person you are. But what we are willing to do for the less fortunate, that's what we're willing to do for our neighbor, really tells me everything about who you are as a person, as an individual, and what your morals are and what you believe in. And to me, that's the important thing. That's the America that I want to live in. That's the America that I want to leave for my kids and my grandkids and the generations to come. That's the America that I'm building this for. That's the America that's the legacy that I want to leave behind, right? What we did for our neighbor, what we did for our friends, what we did for our families. And again, I know this is a complicated topic and there's a lot of things that go into this. But really, I just want to implore you to have a conversation, you know, and not a debate. Have a conversation, have a dialogue about what our communities need, what we can do for our communities. Stop looking to others, what they can do for you, but, put your hand out and give somebody a hand when you can. And, be there for somebody else, be there for your community, help build something you're proud of, help build something that your grandkids and great grandkids can say, hey, this is what my family built. This is the community we've built. This is the community that we left uh, an imprint on. This is the legacy that we have left. So again, there's a lot more than this topic that I can say and talk about, but wanted to keep it concise about certain things and how this affects our marketplaces, how this affects our communities, this is how this affects our families. It's my perspective, and it might be different from yours. Um, but again, this is I think part of the journey of us as humans. So appreciate you guys listening. And if this has been something that's brought value to you, like, comment, share, and we'll see you guys next week. Thank you.